Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Hillsboro, where they're coming up very closely on their bicentennial celebration. Now, Montgomery County already celebrated its bicentennial recently. Hillsboro's right behind them by a couple of years. And behind me is the oldest existing home in Hillsboro, an 1834 home called the Harkey House. And this also happens to be the home to the collection of the Montgomery County Historical Society. So we're going to take a tour of this and see much of the collection here today. And Mike Rapay, you've been a member of this. It's a great organization.
It really is.
And it's interesting for our viewers, I think, because not too many people, not too many organizations have the oldest home as where their collection is, which is kind of a neat thing.
We're really lucky. Yeah. We really are, and happy to have it. Originally, this home sat one block to the north, which is where the fire station is up the street. And in 1968, the Lingo family, who owned a car dealership on the corner up here, needed to expand, needed to go across the street, and they offered the house to the Historical Society, and luckily at that time the Historical Society had the means to be able to actually have it moved in one piece, one block to the south here, and she sits there today.
In 1834, this would have been a show place.
Had to have been. Even the courthouse in Montgomery County was still logs, so the homes around, this was certainly a show place. And I think probably the envy of the downtown part for quite a long time.
People were living in cabins, and there weren't many people here.
There really weren't. And like you said, there were a lot of people living in cabins, and the ones who weren't living in cabins, more than likely were just living in a small frame home that was probably not in the best of shape, or maybe had even built around a cabin at some point in time, and it was more of a structure than it really was a house at that time.
Let's go a little closer, because I wanted to get a good long view of it, but we can get a little closer. We're looking at the front of the house, and you can see there's been an addition put on the back, which was put on
1890.
Later. 1890, okay. And the Harkeys still lived here at the time, is
They
that
did,
right?
they did. They lived in the house until 1906.
And I see you've got a sign here which explains the history of the house. And I'll bet that during your bicentennial celebration of the county, you got a lot of people coming through here, didn't you?
We do have, and we have a gathering every year called Old Settlers, and we're open during Old Settlers, and we get a lot of people who do come through at that time. And yet, just because it's one block off the street, there's actually people who have lived here quite a while who don't really know that it's here. And you'll get them to come in for the first time, and they'll say, I haven't been in here in my life. And when they come in and look at it and see what we have inside, they're pretty happy.
Yeah. This addition, I think you said it was 1906.
1890 was
1890,
right.
Okay, so the Harkeys were still here. They lived here until 1906.
That's correct.
And then it turned over several times, and then I guess nobody's lived in it since 68?
Actually, as far as we know, there was only one owner from 1906 until 1950, and it was a lady who actually gave piano lessons, and a lot of kids came to her for piano lessons. And then in 1950, it was no longer in her possession, and really it sat vacant and was used at times as a warehouse. So it was starting to fall into some pretty bad shape.
Yeah, actually it was a good time for the Historical Society to take it over.
I think it was an now or never proposition.
We're going to talk about this more later, but moving a structure like this that was built in 1834 must have been, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how anybody does it.
Well, and when we go inside, you'll see pictures of them having this house moved all at one time by truck. And in 1968, I mean, I'm sure at that time they had some pretty good means of moving things, but you know, it's not like 2021. And the fact that they were able to get it here in one piece for the most part is pretty amazing.
It is. And if we look at the front, now it's kind of hard to get an angle on it, but if we look at the front, I think you said that this is a Federalist style.
It is.
You know, in the Midwest, you see a lot of them are called I houses. You know, where it's the same. It's Iowa, Indiana, Illinois. That whole Federalist style is very prevalent.
I've heard that terminology myself.
Okay, so I guess the next thing to do here is a porch. I'm sure was not original. That had to be added on.
Yeah, it would have been when it was moved. The porch was changed to just make it usable. Now the foundation itself, the brick that you kind of see down around the foundation, that is the original brick from the original foundation also.
It makes you wonder how in the world. Well,
It's
we'll
amazing.
talk about this.
It's really amazing.
We'll talk about how in the world do you move all those bricks without them getting completely unsettled. But let's go in and
It
take a
couldn't
look.
have been easy, that's for sure.
No.
Also, these windows, while we're here, if I could say,
Yeah.
there is speculation that these are not the original windows below. They probably would have had the 6 above 6, the same style here. But in the 1930s, that when the house was still sitting to the north a block, there was a gentleman who had kind of told the town that he was going to do what he did, and he bought numerous sticks of dynamite and blew himself and his house to smithereens, and all the homes and properties around had window damage and plaster damage and everything else. So these windows undoubtedly
they had to be
were taken
rebuilt.
out. But they looked the period, and again, I think every time they do something, they try to make it look as if it would have in the period.
Well, it smells old.
It is old, musty old houses are.
And
you
well,
know.
it should.
Yeah, it should, because it really is old.
The entry hall is very small.
It is.
They didn't put a lot of grandeur into this, but you're very fortunate that you still have the original staircase, and it's kind of nice. It's sure is sturdy.
It's very well made. It
Yeah.
really is. The craftsmanship in this house is really good. The trim, all that you see in the house, it's all original. It's held together well.
And like we mentioned before, in 1834, having that much woodwork done, that would have been a great expense.
They
It would
had to have been a family of some
did.
means. They
They
had to have
certainly
been.
did. What did he do for a living, by the way?
He was a tanner.
a tanner.
Tanned hides, and he actually ran his operation just down the hill from here, and maybe a few hundred yards to the north.
And they came from North Carolina.
They did. They came from North Carolina, as so many people in
Yep.
the Hillsboro, Montgomery County area did.
Is that right?
They did a lot, and then down in the southern part of Montgomery County, a lot of those original settlers actually came from Tennessee. And but the Hillsboro mostly was settled by.
There was a Hillsboro, North Carolina,
That's-
too,
and-
which may have been, they may have brought that with
That's
them.
the speculation,
Yeah.
is that they named it after, because a lot of the settlers actually came from Hillsboro, North Carolina. And a lot of the speculation is that may be one of the reasons that Hillsboro, along with the hilly terrain, and at times Hillsboro was spelled with the O-U-G-H as opposed to just the O-R-O.
Yeah.
And I believe that Hillsboro, North Carolina, and other Hillsboros throughout the country are spelled, some of them with O-U-G-H.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, that would be, it sounds like an English sort of a. Now, we've talked about the exposing the bricks over here in the corner. Little did you know when you started to move this that all of the walls were brick,
At
which
one
means
time-
it can fall apart.
And it did. It did during the move.
Oh my goodness.
And that's a great example. And as you
Oh.
can see the sign there, it says an example of braced frame construction of the house. It's amazing. Again, the fact that it wasn't just logs is amazing. Again, the bricks at that time to have them made couldn't have been cheap. So again, the Harkeys, when they came here in 1830, must at least have had the means to do
Yeah.
some things.
That would have been a fireplace.
It would have been one of the original fireplaces.
And
that's
I'm
true.
assuming what happened when you moved the house and the bricks fell apart, rather than try to rebuild the fireplace, they just bricked it up.
Right. It would have been cost prohibitive. The original plan of the grant was to try to maybe rebuild the fireplace here and the one on the north wall that you'll see in a little bit, but I think it was just too cost prohibitive.
Let's note now, we're in room number 1. The furnishings in this house are all from the period that the Harkeys would have lived here.
That's
from
correct.
1834 to 1906.
That's correct.
So these are not the Harkeys'
They are
belongings.
not.
They
are
took
not.
them with them.
Oh, they had to have, yeah.
Yeah.
Their belongings were probably quite nice. They weren't going to build a house like this, and I'm sure the furnishings they had, and their family was so big that when it was time for everybody to go their own separate ways, I'm sure that everything got divided up equally.
But the Historical Society was committed to keeping it to the period when the Harkeys lived here. So everything you see when you come in is from that same time
Right,
period.
from 1834 to 1906 should be applicable, yes.
Can you imagine moving one of these across the prairie?
I wouldn't want to try. I wouldn't want to
Because
try.
it wasn't made locally.
Undoubtedly.
Where the heck did this
Yeah,
come from?
undoubtedly came by train and somehow a horse and carriage or somebody later on, maybe a
You'd
truck.
have to devote an entire buggy to that one piano.
And a lot of men.
And a lot of, that's right. Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay, so this would have been formal parlor.
We think so. We think this might even have been where we were just at, a place where chances are the kids weren't often allowed.
Yeah.
They would have been told, get in here and play.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
That was
Well,
more of
and-
a formal
And
parlor.
and most home people, like I said, people were living in a cabin. They had one room, one big
Right,
room.
that's
So
right.
this is well off.
That's
This
right.
is when you can give the kids a place to play in a living room, call it a living room. That's pretty interesting. And again, here we ran into this again, where they had a fireplace in here.
That's right.
And I'm sure it was these two fireplaces are what kept the house warm.
And they also extended into the second story, which we'll see later, but they terminated them at the floor level.
Yeah.
And,
well, the heat rising would have kept the whole house, you know,
Right.
probably warm enough. Now, there is another interesting local aspect in this room. If you go just down the road a little bit, there's a town called Donaldson.
That's correct.
And it's named after an artist who had some fame.
His
and
family.
Still is quite well known. And there's a picture of him here working in his studio in Donaldson.
Right.
And what was his name?
His name was Carson Donnell.
Carson Donnell.
And his family, his ancestors, who the town was named for, came to that area reasonably early and settled there. And that's a picture of him working in his studio in his barn loft. And he is a listed artist, and I can tell you, just from personal experience, that his paintings are hard to come by.
Well, let's take a look at some of them, because you've got these are all original Donald paintings here.
They are.
You have some personal experience because you tried to buy one, right?
I tried to buy one about the size of a letter envelope, and it didn't work out. I bid quite high on it.
You couldn't afford it, huh?
No.
So how did the Historical Society come by these?
Over the years, different people have acquired Carson Donnell paintings. He was really prolific. He painted quite a few. We've had these donated to us by individuals. I believe a couple of them from the Donnell family. And just over the years, you acquire things, and people are kind enough to say, hey, we don't want them anymore, or they're not right with our style or whatever, and would you like to have them? And we don't ever turn down a Carson Donnell painting.
I wonder what he did in the spring, summer, and winter, because everything is a fall.
He did do some scenes in fall and winter, or spring also, but he did woodcuts a lot too, and he was known for his woodcuts. I do have a couple of his woodcuts.
It's beautiful stuff, and I love
really
the
is.
autumn colors. So
it really is.
He was really hooked on autumn, but it's really nice stuff.
And it looks nice in here. It helps.
It really does. It sure does. Okay, so again, period furnishings.
Right.
Now we're going to leave the original footprint of the house.
We are now.
This was the back of the house.
Right.
And a walkway was cut through here in 1890. Okay, so they expanded so that they'd be able to have a place where they could have a dining room.
Dining room.
And they needed a kitchen.
That's right.
They probably had a kitchen outside at some point.
Sure, I think like everybody else, they would have had, a lot of times they called it a summer kitchen, but you would have undoubtedly cooked there year round, and may have even had what they used to call a dog trot that would go between the home and the outside kitchen. Part of the reason was, obviously, if they were cooking in the summertime, it would get awfully hot. It was already, hot as could be at that time anyway, but also, if the kitchen would catch on fire, it would be a lot easier to maintain in a separate area and not let it spread to the house also. And so there were multiple reasons why they would have been outside.
And this flooring is original to that period of time.
To the 1890s, and the flooring that we've just been in was original to the 1834 structure. Yes.
And we were talking outside about the challenges to moving the house, and I really like the fact that you all were able to keep some of the photos that were taken of the process, because, like I say, in 1968, it's still not easy to move a house, but back then, moving a house from a brick foundation and brick walls, even if it's only a block or two,
it's amazing. And they did it for a cost of $3,000.
Is that right?
Yeah, not too bad.
Oh wow!
I'm glad they only had to move it a block.
These are really neat. These really show the bones of the house too.
Does.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, it must have been an amazing process. In '68, I was 7, so I don't remember him doing it. Had I known, I think I probably would have come up and watched. I've lived here my whole life.
Yes, so. I would now.
I would
see
too.
How it's done.
I would too.
Abraham Lincoln has a presence in much of Illinois, but you all are really proud of this because he apparently liked Hillsboro quite a bit. He was on his way back and forth to Vandalia, and this was right on the way, and he stopped here frequently.
He did, and he had a lot of good friends. Probably one of his best friends was a family by the name of Eccles, and they lived literally just, their home at that time was literally just across the street, and then there's one house that you need to skip over to get to where their house was. It's no longer there. They had been friends for a long, long time, and the piece of wood that you're kind of looking at right now, which kind of doesn't look like much, but it actually was salvaged when the house was being torn down to build the current brick structure that is there. And the people who knew where exactly Abraham Lincoln used to sit when he came to the Eccles on the staircase, and he'd stretch his legs out and spin some tales and tell some stories and maybe drink a little bit of cider or something. That is the step that he sat on, which is interesting.
Well, it's nice
I'm glad
that somebody
they
was
saved
able. Oh, yeah, it's nice, really nice that somebody was able to salvage that.
May
Not
not
let
look like
that
much.
get away.
Yeah, may not look like much to some, but
Yep. Yep. Well, that's terrific. And then, of course, they had to have a kitchen too.
they did.
And this is a nice big space to work. And of course, if you have 6 kids, you need some space if you're going to feed them all day long.
For 1890, it really is a pretty good sized space. And we talked before about the platter. This platter, the big platter right here, I'll get this out of the way, is the only thing that we know 100% sure did belong to the Harkey family. And it's a shame we don't have more things, but at least we have that.
Yeah. And how did this get saved?
I have no idea.
You just know that it's part
The
of their
society
collection.
actually was formed in 1913, and it went really well, I think, until sometime probably in the 1930s. It kind of tapered off, and then some people back in the 60s decided it was time to kind of redo the Historical Society and get it started back up. And I would assume that has been with the house the whole time. When they moved the house, they probably found that somewhere in the home, or Mrs. Gilmore, who the piano teacher, may have saved it, but that's the only thing that we know that actually belonged to the Harkeys.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have something.
It's not, better than nothing.
Now, the porch that we're about to go on to was built on, I guess, at the same time this addition
we
was
believe
built
so,
on.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. But there's some items of interest out there, and I'd like to go out if we can. Yeah. Okay, Mike. This porch was built off the kitchen back when, 1890 probably.
That's
something
what
like
everybody
that.
believes. That's
Yeah,
what the
it
architects
wasn't. It wasn't here originally because what we're looking at here is the original back of the house before the addition, and that would have been the back door.
The original back door.
Okay, and they would have come. Now there may have been a porch here at some point.
Could have been.
They probably got rid of when they built the new one,
Or at least a walkway of some kind.
Yeah, some way to step down and get outside to the to the latrine and wherever else they needed the outdoor kitchen.
Right.
All those kind of items. You guys, it's interesting. That old sled is priceless.
It is.
It's really nifty. I don't think I've ever seen one like that.
Again, it's another example of people come up with things and say, "Would you like that?" And yeah, we would.
Yeah, has nothing to do with the Harkeys, but it's
doesn't.
cool.
But it is period correct to what they may have had. We've talked a lot about the Harkeys being people of means, but they surely suffered a lot of the same depredations that everybody at that time suffered. And for example, I know that their 6th child, Mary, she passed away when she was only 1. Yeah. Then they lost a daughter when she was 8, another daughter when I believe she was 18, a son when he was 25. So of the 9 children that they had, again, they had their hardships too.
Yeah, they did. They did.
Interesting bathtub. How would you like to have been the 6th child or so?
You'd use the same water. That's what
exactly.
The youngest kid always gets the dirtiest water, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what you use because
that's
what you had, and you're not
it.
going to haul a lot more water than you need.
That's correct.
Now, I wanted to come out here for another reason too, because in the back,
Shove it. There you go.
is another very old building which has a relationship to this. And this is now the Historical Society owns this building and rents it out, and this is part of where your income comes from.
That is our income.
But it was before that, it was a school.
It was. The structure that you're seeing now, of course, is not that old, but it was built around what at that time was the first school in Hillsboro proper. I don't know that all of the logs are still inside, but I know that one wall still has the logs that the home is built around. And the rafters in the attic, you can look up and see they were all hand cut and still have the bark on the logs themselves. So yeah, this is, if everything that you read, and there's some people that'll argue it with you, but everything that you read said that the first school sat on the brow of the hill, and during the phase where they were trying to get grants for the Harkey House and to move and to restore it, there was also mention made that the house would be sitting directly in front of what had been the original school in Hillsboro, the first school.
This was probably a one-room schoolhouse.
I would think so.
And it was built, if it was here in the 1830s, that again, like the other buildings around it, there would have been very few buildings, and most of them cabins.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And this would have been a mansion.
It really would have been.
Mansion.
Again, And even though it's that one block north,
Yeah.
the other houses, I know the house across the street is really old. There's a house 2 up that I think are extremely old.
Yeah.
So this was one of the areas of town that was developed first, at least as far as dwellings.
Yeah. Okay, let's walk over here just briefly, because this has nothing to do with the Harkeys either, but I just think it's cool that you saved it. This this tells you a lot, actually, if you're trying to find out who was who when the old jail was built in 1908. It gives you a pretty good idea. And this was the cornerstone of the old jail. The old jail's gone, of course.
It's
right?
gone. It's sat where the new courthouse sits today. Yeah, it says, again, somebody calls and says, hey, we've got this thing and we've got nowhere to put it and we don't want to haul it off. Are you guys interested in it? Well, sure, we'll take it.
Yep.
And even what you see here, the big old steel door, the jail was built with a turret front, and you can see that the door has curvature to it. And that was the original door that was on the outside of the jail. And we got a telephone call one day from somebody saying that it was way out in the country. They were actually using it as a bridge across a small creek. And did we want it? Well, sure. So myself and Jim May and my buddy Greg D. Wright, and we went out to get it. And thank goodness the gentleman who was donating it to us and his dad were there, because that is one heavy door.
Oh, I'll bet.
We loaded it onto a wagon, and it was all we could do to get it from the country and through the timber and through the woods.
And it's not going anywhere, is it?
No, not for now. No, it
Not
sure
until
isn't.
you resurrect that jail. Then you can put it back.
Exactly.
Okay, well, terrific. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mike. What a lot of kids and a lot of steps landed on these steps over the years, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
I'm surprised that they're not all warped up.
They're in good shape.
They
really
are in good shape. The whole house is in good shape, considering how much traffic it got. We talked about 6 kids, actually 9 kids, 3 passed
9
away.
total.
So,
Yeah.
but 6 at any one time would have been here. Let's go in this room, because this would have been the kids' room. And can you imagine pretty tight quarters, huh?
Well, yeah, and if there were, let's say, as many as 6 kids here at one time, you can, I guess, imagine them sleeping in here kind of packed in like sardines, I guess. I suppose they could have had a pallet of some kind on the floor for maybe little ones or something like that. But yeah, and these are the old rope-style beds. And I know you've heard the phrase "sleep tight" before. And that means tighten the ropes on your bed so you're sleeping tight.
Is that right? Is that right?
That's where it came from.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah. Well, these are not tight.
Well, we're not
I'll
going to
tell you what,
on
I'd have
them.
to tighten these up before I got in, but that's how they're made.
Yep, it sure is.
And you can see that it's probably real rough-hewn lumber, and
They are.
yeah, neat.
We don't know who
That's-
donated those to us,
Yeah.
but the 2 beds are not identical, so my guess is that they were donated by 2 separate families.
Nice examples of quilts that might have been
They are.
around at the time. And I like this too, because these examples of what the kids may have worn to bed. This is all manner of clothing, bed clothing for kids.
They really are. And the trunks are full of clothing also, and the dresser that you'll see here in a minute. And
Yeah. Okay, so we had a 2-bedroom, all this house for 2 bedrooms.
2 bedrooms.
You know, we wouldn't build it that way
Right.
anymore. We
4
would've-
rooms total when it was built, 2 above, 2
I
below.
know, I know. And then this would have been the master, we think.
We think.
Yeah.
We do. Again, the room is full of period pieces from anytime from 1834 to 1906, and we've got some strange things in here, but it's actually behind this bed there's also an entrance to attic space.
Oh, is that right? Have you ever
Small.
been in there?
We have, and there isn't anything in there at all.
Too bad.
I
That's
know,
when you
we were
find
hoping.
treasures. You
Yeah,
know,
we
maybe
were
there's a
hoping it was
treasure
a
in
secret
there or
door of some
something.
kind.
Yeah.
These are kind of interesting. I mean, it just shows, even though, sometimes even not that this belonged to the Harkeys, but undoubtedly somebody decided to recycle. This was made out of probably an old lid, different pieces of wood that were made into usable furniture, and this with the name Litchfield on it, and undoubtedly either came from the city of Litchfield or some of the original founders who were named Litchfield.
Never let anything go to waste. If you've got a
No.
good piece of wood, build something around it, right?
Early recycling.
Yeah, I'll be darned. And if we look just to the left of the bed down, this is a education for kids. They may not know what a bedpan is. They may not know what it's like to live without running water in a toilet. But this is what it was like, because you didn't, on a winter night, you didn't want to go out to the latrines.
And that's actually a little bit newer than what you would expect in the chamber pot that's behind it there. But yeah, it would have been porcelain for the most of the time that the Harkeys lived in this house.
Well, even if people aren't interested in the Harkeys and aren't interested in this house, if they're interested in period clothing and furniture, this is really a cool
It really is. It makes for a really nice tour, and we're lucky because it does encompass different time frames, and we have a lot of different things, not just a few of the same style or something like that. So yeah, it gives a pretty good example of what the period pieces would have been through that specific time frame.
You may have noticed that the paint is flaking off the Harkey House. The plan is by 2023, when Hillsboro's bicentennial occurs, that the paint job will be complete. And I'm told that it won't be white because white was not used during that period. The Harkey House is available if you have a group by appointment, and they'll arrange to have you go through for a tour. With another Illinois Story in Hillsboro, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.